we have the great wealth transfer happening, right? We have $100 trillion changing hands. 9 out of 10 heirs are saying that they don't want to work with the same advisor as their parent. So there's this massive opportunity right now for advisors to just go after it. They have to, they cannot just ignore that anymore.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with Mark Heynen and James Cantwell. Every week, Mark and James break down the latest in the world of wealth tech and AI, and occasionally bring in guests to spice things up. This is not investment advice and not professionally produced. I am not real and not yet sentient. Now let's get on with the show.
Welcome to episode 11 of AI for Advisors. James and I are very excited to have two phenomenal guests today. Victoria Toli, co-founder and president of Finny, and Arnulf Hsu, founder and CEO of GReminders. Really fascinating people in high-growing companies who have great backgrounds, and excited to get into what is happening right now, specifically with using AI for sourcing new leads and also enabling the whole meeting lifecycle and what's happening with your clients. So very excited to have you guys on. Maybe I'll kick it off, Victoria, with you, and have each of you maybe introduce a bit about sort of the founding stories of your companies. And maybe for context, I was recently at a event with some investors here in the Bay Area, and an investor from a fairly prominent VC firm said, the general conventional wisdom is don't start a company for real estate agents or financial advisors because they seem easy to sell to, but they're generally very difficult for selling and adopting new technology. I had another investor say financial advisors are the cavemen of adopting technology. So you guys both come from backgrounds where you've done things in different areas outside of the space. So you're very familiar with how the world works outside of the financial advisor space. So I'd love, maybe, Victoria, starting with you, just founding story. How did you get into this and decide this is the problem to solve?
First of all, I could not disagree more with these investors. We heard that time and time again when we were getting started, that selling to wealth managers is notoriously hard.
Yeah.
There's this really long tail that is very unapproachable. There's no way to get these guys. And that has been single-handedly the worst piece of advice we could have ever gotten. I'm so glad we ignored that. I would argue the exact opposite to be true. I think financial advisors are so eager to adopt new technologies. It's been one of the verticals that has been adopting AI at the fastest rate, actually. So a bit of a side note to your actual question, which is how we stumbled across the problem, but I just needed to set the record straight. And I can talk about that for a really long time.
Thank you.
We were also one of the first wealth tech companies to be accepted in Y Combinator, and I think traditionally they had a very similar stance until they realized, wait a sec, this is actually totally wrong with AI, and course corrected.
So this was before Time, I imagine.
Time and us actually were in the same batch, yes, and then Powder.
Oh, really? So two companies in the same batch,
which
wow.
Shows how Y Combinator actually did a 180 if you really think about it. But anyway, the way we came across this problem was actually pretty interesting. My co-founder, who was working at Boston Consulting Group at the time, did a lot of work with wealth managers, and specifically was really helping with the inorganic side of the house, evaluate other acquisition targets, create the models behind their valuations and whatnot. And what she really observed was how big of a problem growth was in the space, and how these firms were resorting to inorganic growth as a way to kind of compensate for that. And I remember getting a call from her saying, inorganic growth and acquisitions are one way to go about it, but what if these people had actually a way to grow in a repeatable, predictable, scalable, and way more capital efficient way? And that got me thinking, and coming from Uber.
And how did you guys know each other? Like, she called you, so you must have had a previous relationship.
Yes, we were good friends. Yeah, we were good friends for a while.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I didn't know much about the industry at all, but I started paying attention because I really believed in us as a duo. And the more I dug in, the more fascinating the space really became. And I remember getting on the call with advisors to really understand, the user, the persona, who they are. And I remember hearing things like, a quote that really stuck with me was, every single morning I wake up and the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth thing I think about is, how am I going to bring new clients to my business? And then my follow-up to that was, and how do you do that today? And the answers I heard just blew my mind completely, right? I would hear things like, oh, referrals primarily. Maybe I look at the news, try to see what's happening, try to find these people on LinkedIn, message them. It was just this super archaic, super disjointed system. And no wonder it takes, 60 hours of business development work for every one prospect that ends up converting. There hasn't been any tool for that. And that was really my kind of aha moment where I thought, there's something to be done here. Everything going on in AI was definitely a catalyst, but fundamentally the problem was just so obvious, and the lack of solutions really solving the problem adequately were also very obvious.
Victoria, do you think that most advisors are only now, because of the ease of using tools like Finny, thinking more about being far more proactive with going after and finding their own clients versus kind of the traditional method of it's all referral based?
Well, Finny is definitely a part of it, but there's definitely a number of other really interesting macroeconomic shifts happening in the industry. Well, for one, the referral pipeline is drying out, right? Like the younger generations are less and less dependent on referrals. The number one factor for them when deciding who to work with is actually an advisor's online presence, not a referral. There's all these stats that are backing that out. But at the same time, there's also obviously such high private equity activity in the space. Last year alone, I think there was $500 billion that was invested in RIA roll-ups, and that comes with high expectations for growth, one, but also now advisors know that they could sell their business at a very lucrative price, and the number one predictor that determines what price they're going to sell for is their organic growth multiple.
Yeah.
On top of
Exactly.
that, to make matters even more attractive, we have the great wealth transfer happening, right? We have $100 trillion changing hands. 9 out of 10 heirs are saying that they don't want to work with the same advisor as their parent. So there's this massive opportunity right now for advisors to just go after it. They have to, they cannot just ignore that anymore. And the tools are now starting to catch up.
And organic growth, just to be clear, is people coming in through the front door or responding to a campaign in some way, rather than, when you say inorganic growth, that includes referrals, to be clear? Or how would you classify inorganic growth?
I would say organic growth could also cover referrals, but I was referring to the, kind of standard way of you have $10 million, you invest it in a way that would yield, like a 5x ROI. That kind of deterministic model is what we're thinking about. But generally would be, yes, net new assets that are coming through new clients that are not, market growth and not acquired.
Got it. Interesting. And do you find there is, there's a lot of talk about people turning away from email, email being saturated because there are so many AI-generated emails. I imagine email's a big piece of your solution. What are you seeing on the front lines there in this space? Is that just not the case? I'm curious what you think.
I had the same initial assumption as you, that email would be saturated and not really that effective. We're actually not seeing that at all. We're seeing emails be extremely effective. In some of our campaigns, we actually have a 16% response rate, which is just mind-blowing, right? Like the industry average is around like less than 1%. And the reason for that is the relevance, right? Like, yes, you won't respond to a spam-looking AI-generated email that has no, ties to you. But we, the other day, got an email that was just so hyper-targeted to me and my co-founder. It was all about, Y Combinator founder alums trying to cut down on their data costs based on this database that everyone's using. And for us, that was just so timely. They nailed the timing perfectly. It's exactly the thing we were thinking about. You bet we responded to that email because it was just so hyper-personalized and hyper-targeted that you just could not ignore. Having said that, Finny's not just reliant on email. We also have LinkedIn embedded into the platform, LinkedIn Actions, and the combination of the two together is extremely powerful, what we call multi-channel campaigns.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, Arnulf, let's bring you in here. I mean, maybe just to put it bluntly, why start another company? You've had a number of successes in the past. And then why even in this space? I would love like the founding story behind GReminders and how it's grown.
That's because I have nothing else to do. And this is
fair enough.
And this is my hobby. Okay, this is the work.
It's out of complete boredom. So you'd be doing train
literally. I mean, that's the honest truth. And so, so when we started the business, it was really a side project that I was tinkering with, and really that's the name of the company is really around notifications, right? Reminders. And so Google had sunsetted some SMS stuff. We thought, we'd just throw something together and quite frankly, do something around Google Calendar and so on and so forth. And so we really started kind of in this notification area. And selling to B2C oriented sort of professional services organizations, right? So think about doctors' offices, financial advisors, therapists, healthcare, folks like that. I'm a big fan of vertical markets as a whole, and as we started getting into understanding who was using this stuff, we started doing some discovery. We had hired a couple of people that sort of came out of finance. We had a couple of concentrations in healthcare as well as in financial services. And again, started trying to understand, where are the gaps and so on and so forth. And so, because, I can't leave things alone and things have to grow and so forth. So, quite frankly, we started layering on sort of additional capabilities, but really focused almost exclusively on wealth management over the last 2.5 years. Okay, so that's literally all we do. 90% of all net new comes from the wealth management space. And we focus on what we call end-to-end meeting management. And so we talk about this meeting lifecycle. And so while Finny is doing an awesome job sorting on the prospecting side, we generally work on sort of the back office with regard to continuous engagement with the existing clients. So it starts from like getting the annual review or biannual review or quarterly review booked with the client, which that is a whole pain on its own. Just getting that onto the calendar, making sure that you reach it at the right time, using different mechanisms, email, SMS, phone call, things of that nature. Then making sure that they show up by sending, email, SMS, and so on and so forth. Thirdly, kicking off different types of workflows within the existing systems. So we spend a lot of time integrating with all the systems that financial advisors use every day. And there have been scheduling products out there that sort of, do this kind of generically, but typically stop at like Outlook or Google Calendar, right? They don't go into systems that financial advisors use. And so we spend a lot of time sort of integrating with those, kicking off flows and so on and so forth. And then with generative AI, because we're hooked up to all these different data sets, we're able to basically aggregate a lot of data together, be it email, be it notes, being meeting data, be it portfolio management data, account data, and so on and so forth. And we're able to aggregate like pre-meeting briefs and things like that. So again, a lot of this stuff has been done manually. People spend 4, 5, 6 hours putting together these pre-meeting briefs before they meet with a client. AI is doing that now in 5-10 minutes. And then, in the meeting, you've got a note taker, which transcribes, pulls full summaries, determines various to-dos, recommends opportunities. They're talking about, having a kid or something like that. Maybe recommend a 529 plan or change job, 401k rollover, things of that nature. And then again, push all that stuff back into the system of record and then help with some automated email follow-ups, again, leveraging Gen AI. So again, kind of this whole meeting lifecycle, and it's come together, I would say, very nicely. And that's what we do today.
That's amazing. And so you've recently made a transition from Ask Anything to Do Anything. You introduced an Ask Anything bot, and now I understand is Do Anything. I'm just curious, what was the thinking behind that, and how much agency do you think advisors will want to give their AI? How much do you think they will want to be in the loop going forwards?
I think nobody became a financial advisor to do a bunch of admin rote work, right? So that's my general comment there. And so like we want to try to leverage automation and AI to make advisors significantly more efficient and more effective. And so, we see advisors saving somewhere in order of 500-600 hours per advisor per year by leveraging systems like ours. And that includes, all of the meeting stuff that I talked about, but then also we have an AI assistant essentially that sits on top of that same data set that I referred to earlier. So it's able to pull all that data together and effectively load natural language on top of that through effectively an AI assistant. You can ask questions against it. And then you can also ask it to do stuff like make me a task, kick off this flow, tell me about the portfolio performance. How does the portfolio perform relative to these tariffs or things of that nature, right? So it has access to all of that stuff. And so there's an AI assistant that effectively sits on top of each household record. So we're not doing that across the entire firm. We're literally doing it at the household level, kind of constraining the data set to be, again, client specific.
Interesting. Yeah, so that 600-hour number is pretty wild. So I think that's, good for you. I think that's, really 2 hours per day at least, right, is an interesting way to think about it. And if I understand correctly, you have 2,000 plus advisors using the platform for 50 plus RAAs, 35 plus integrations. I think that is very impressive. And if I understand correctly, you recently got approved by Osaic, so also very impressive. Did I miss anything there or misstate any of that?
Yeah, that's right. I'll add to the you had asked Victoria about the space in general and sort of how be it archaic or adoption and so on and so forth. And one of the things that's very interesting in the space, it's actually we spend a lot of time with broker dealers. And so we've been approved by probably 65-70% of all the broker dealers in the US. And so this not only creates a moat, but also is a great levered go-to-market. So the biggest challenge that I found in this space is that it's a very compliance-heavy space, right? And so we try to do everything in a very compliance-friendly way. And so journaling, archiving, SOC 2, whatever, you name it, we really lean into compliance a lot. And once you can get through that, it is a very rich sort of environment to operate under. And so we actually found it as a tailwind as opposed to a headwind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, Victoria, I'm interested, what kind of growth were you expecting when you were first putting together the business plan? I'm sure, considering your backgrounds, you guys spend a lot of time in spreadsheets. And then, how does that match what you're seeing now, where I understand you've 10x'd your revenue since May of this year, which is a pretty amazing growth rate?
We definitely didn't expect that kind of explosive growth. I think a few things went right for us. Well, one was picking a problem that every advisor cares about and delivering a product that I take a lot of pride in. It's truly intuitive. It's meant to be delightful. And it's as agentic as it could possibly be, meaning it doesn't require much work from the advisor. It rather takes work off their plate. And I think that messaging has really resonated. And then the other piece of the puzzle here that I think played a key role was our obsessive focus with the SMB side of the market, the smaller RIAs that had traditionally been almost overlooked by other growth tools. And I think just us democratizing a lot of the growth and offering an affordable and effective tool, I think had a lot to do with it.
And I imagine you used your own tool to find those prospects, right? I mean, the critical issue there with small companies is the go-to-market motion can be really complicated.
Funny enough, 80% of our growth has fully been inbound. We have to this day done only one outbound campaign ever just to test it out. We've been in a lot of conferences. We put a lot of thought leadership. We speak on panels. So that brand, I think, has been quite helpful and attracted people our way. But our acquisition costs are pretty much zero.
Wow. I mean, that's impressive. So let's talk about the future. I think now everyone has context of what you guys do. The big question is, what is left for advisors to do if they can automate their pipeline, bringing people in and automate their back office? And the default answer here is usually, judgment and empathy, right? They want to exercise judgment with their clients. And, obviously there's a human element of empathy with what people are going through on various stages. So I want to put that to one side. So outside of judgment and empathy, what do you think the superpowers are that let's say we roll 3-5 years in the future, what are financial advisors going to be spending their time doing going forwards? How are they going to be spending their days?
I think both of our products actually are getting to the same goal here, which is in the future, and even one would argue today already this is happening, advisors will be able to pick what they want to spend their time on and actually automate away everything that is not that exciting to them, such as admin, for instance. But anything that's just not that meaningful to them could be done by their AI assistant, is how we think about it with Finny. And, for a lot of people, that prospecting happens to be one of those things that are just not that exciting. So I think what we're all trying to solve for, all the tools in the market, is just equipping advisors with the right tools and giving them the power to be able to determine where they spend their time. I suspect that most advisors would answer that question, would choose to reinvest the 20% time savings that McKinsey and BCG are claiming advisors will get towards deepening their existing relationships, right? Like, this is a people's industry. This is a premium industry. I think where advisors thrive.
So spend time on the phone with people, spending time in person or on the phone with their clients.
In person, I think in large, but also on the phone. And the way I think of financial advisors is actually more similar to a financial therapist, right? It's not just about, the empathy and the judgment. It's also about making people comfortable with their financial situation, their financial decisions. And that's something that AI could never possibly do.
Is there something go ahead.
I was going to say, there's a reason why consumers hire financial advisors, right? I mean, they could do this on their own. They could use a robo-advisor if they wanted to. There are many options out there, or they can make their own investment decisions. And the reason they use a financial advisor is because they want to trust somebody that they're going to be good stewards and they're going to help them live better financial lives. And so ultimately, in my opinion, that's where financial advisors should be spending their time. They should be spending their time with clients. They shouldn't be doing all this, back office work. And if they can, again, take time savings 20, 30, 40%, either put it against building better relationships and maybe, growing AUM potentially through accessing, additional funds that might be held elsewhere or whatever, or growing the practice through through prospecting and building a larger client base. Time has always been the biggest constraint for this industry.
Totally agree. The average advisor actually, besides their newsletters and whatnot, the average advisor actually checks in with their clients once a year. This is, in the age of AI now, with everything else getting abstracted away, this is just unacceptable. 53% of consumers state that they would never leave their advisor for poor performance, but they would leave their advisors if they're not made to feel special. Advisors now have no excuse. They should be making their clients feel special.
Number one reason they leave, because they don't get touched enough.
Yep.
Yeah, and that authenticity and trust, I guess I'm curious. I recently had someone close to me come down on me for sending in an email with some AI stuff in it, some work slop, basically, right? And the challenge to me was, hey, is this authentic communication? You're basically copying and pasting something from AI to answer a question. It's not coming from your head, right? And I guess in both of your cases, there's AI elements in the emails being sent out, right? I'm just curious, do you think the client is going to lose some level of trust or authenticity with their financial advisor if there are AI elements in their communication? Or do you think we've reached beyond that where it's, everyone understands it's all blended and it doesn't matter?
No, I think it does matter. It definitely does matter. I think what we'll see is AI getting better and better at, as creepy as that sound and emulate the advisors much, much better. We're already starting to see that, right? So that's one piece. The second thing that we take very, very seriously at Finny is whatever AI generates, the human is always in the loop. The advisor is always the last person to give their thumbs up, their approval, make changes, because ultimately it does have to sound just like them. We've have seen a lot of campaigns now go through Finny, and the ones that are authentic sounding are performing so much better than the ones that sound like AI. And both could be, written under the hood primarily by AI, but it just requires that like advisor authenticity 100%.
Yeah, everything, nothing is sent out to the client without somebody reviewing it. Nothing.
So it puts emails in drafts.
That's exactly right. So as soon as you're done with the meeting, 30 seconds after the meeting is done, there's an email draft waiting for you in your drafts folder in Outlook or Google. And you review it, right? The advisor reviews it before they send it off to the client. Most of the rest of us, so the AI assistant and so forth, that's really an internal tool, right? Used for the firm internally. And so again, there's nothing that's AI facing that gets auto sent to clients directly.
Yeah, I've actually shared with people that, we have Knapsack, we have our own Nap that does auto drafting responses, and there are a number of other tools out there. I'm at a conference here with a number of other founders. A number of people said they use tools, some of whom I've never heard of before, right, that actually do auto drafting of responses. I think it's actually quite common now. I find there's this interesting behavior change where you start living in your drafts. So your inbox is so populated that you can basically just look in your drafts to figure out what is important to look at, right? And that's your top priority inbox effectively at that point, right? And I do edit the emails a little bit, but it definitely saves me a tremendous amount of time, especially around scheduling, right? I think you guys both have mentioned that, the scheduling of the time is such a time suck. I've actually came across someone here who has someone in the Philippines with their credentials to their email actually send their emails for them. Just imagine that level of trust, right? That's just insane. But the email overload is so extreme that they're willing to actually give their credentials to someone, half a world away. So I actually think the cultural change around it being acceptable to use AI as an assistant to do this work is I think inevitable, right? And I think of it as the uncanny valley of text, really, right? Like, it's not going to sound like slop. It's going to, like you were saying, Victoria, it sounds like you. I think that's a really important piece of it. And then it also has access to all the information from meeting transcripts, et cetera. I think that's really, really important. I guess the question then is, is it actually not 20%? You're saying McKinsey and BCG are saying is a 20% time saving. It could actually be 50%, right? It could be a really, really significant time saving. And I don't even know how much time the clients want to spend with their advisors, right? The advisor might be pinging them saying, hey, let's check in. And they're like, we're good. We've talked before. And I don't know if there's a logical breaking point at which 203, we had Dr. Sindhu on the podcast recently who said there was someone doing 300, 400 clients individually. There might be a logical breaking point where you just can't. I think the average is 120, 140. You can't actually take on more clients. So I'm actually wondering out loud, is there actually a fundamentally different structure? If we really think 3 years out, some people may think people will be behaving very differently at that point, right? Is it going to look very different?
Yeah, there's physical limits to certainly what you can do, but if you can take practice of, say one advisor doing 120 clients, and you take that up to 160, 170, 180, 190, that's a very meaningful impact on the firm. And, if you talk about, the M&A environment and so on and so forth, there's multiple essentially that are directly related to sort of enterprise value and so forth. And so, again, I think, we call AI sort of the invisible partner, right? It's not really seen. But it sort of makes you superhuman, and sort of kind of that's our viewpoint on that.
I think it's not off the table that in the next, conservatively speaking, 10 years, there'd be a single, one-man show, $1 billion RIA. Because think about it, if the tools right now are already getting us to 20 or 50%, we're still at the early days of AI.
Yeah, there's compounding, right? And I guess it's down to how much physical time you're willing or interested in spending. And I think it's assuming a synchronous communication flow, right? So if it's an asynchronous communication flow, it could scale very differently, and it could be that the younger generation is very different. And I guess it really comes down to when the wealth transfer actually happens. Either all these different predictions, right? But it could be that the actual wealth transfer is maybe 10 years out, the bulk of it, right? Just because of the way aging is happening. So that's probably going to be the fundamental distinction. I find it to be an interesting question in terms of how that'll evolve. I also think that the advisors themselves, the composition of the advisors will change, right, in terms of their motivations. The younger advisors may have different motivations. And the roll-ups are having their own impact. And actually, this was another interesting question that's come from other conversations I've had. Are the PE firms that are rolling up actually asking or requesting or mandating their advisors, the RIAs they acquire, use these tools to ensure optimal operations? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think that's a big value add that a lot of these aggregators provide is a homogeneous tech stack, a process that scales across all the firms and so forth, the consolidation of those functions and done in a more structured fashion. A lot of the sort of smaller firms, they may not have the disciplines, they may not have the management disciplines, they may not have the technology disciplines to put all those systems in place. And so I think that's a big part of the value add, is to make these people more efficient or more effective relative to what they are, and as a result, also growing the firm.
Yeah, we're seeing the exact same.
Yeah, that's right. But it's still up to the advisor, to be clear, right? I imagine. How much discretion do you see the individual advisor having?
I think less. I think less and less. I think as the firm grows or as the firm matures, or as these aggregators roll up different RAs and so forth, there is standardization, and that's part of what it means to join that organization is that you streamline and structure. And there may be a transition period, but within 6 months or 12 months, we expect everybody to be on the same systems.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, that's an interesting opportunity. To your point, Victoria, that's probably something that's driving higher adoption rates than in other segments, right? Because there are multiple reasons to adopt, 100%. Right? That's really interesting. Well, generally we do look at the news briefly when we're closing out the show, and the big news from this week is OpenAI launching their browser. And so I'm just going to quickly read a LinkedIn post on this. We usually call this segment Best of LinkedIn. Here we have a LinkedIn post from Emil Potolinski, an editor and writer. Would you use a browser from OpenAI? The world's biggest startup has launched ChatGPT Atlas. I find it hilarious that people still think of OpenAI as a startup, but neither here nor there. It's web browser available now for Mac OS and coming soon for Windows, iOS, and Android. Atlas has an opt-in browser memories feature that lets ChatGPT remember key details from web pages you browse to improve its responses. OpenAI gave 2 examples: ChatGPT creating a to-do list from your recent browsing activity and continuing to research holiday gifts based on products. It has an agent mode that lets ChatGPT automate web-based tasks on your behalf. So, just wanted to first ask if you guys have tried this, and maybe, Comet's been out for a while. We've seen the browser company was sold to Atlassian. Chrome launched their Gemini, assistant. So we're seeing more and more of these tools be embedded into the browser. Obviously, that's a little bit of a threat to anyone building apps in the browser. My first question is really just around user adoption, user receptiveness to, a new way of doing web browsing. Do you think the timing's right for this? Do you think it's early? Do you think people are receptive to it? Do you guys find it compelling?
As with everything, but these things in particular, there's going to be a cohort of early adopters, right? Like, would my parents try this? Probably not, but would I? 100%. I'm eager to see what's out there. And I just think this, if anything, validates how quickly AI is becoming better and better and even more human-like. And with actually as part of Y Combinator last summer, Sam Altman came and gave a talk. And what my main takeaway of that talk really was that if you're a startup, what you really should make sure you're doing is bet on OpenAI, not against OpenAI. There's all these jokes about companies that go out of business the moment that OpenAI releases a new feature. But that is all whenever you're trying to correct something about OpenAI. You're finding a flaw and you're trying to make it better. But if you're betting that OpenAI and all these models alike will just keep getting better and better, and you build assuming it will get better and better, you're on the winning side. And for me, that just validates how quickly OpenAI is evolving, how much better the models are becoming by the minute, and it just increases my conviction in what both of us are building, really.
Yeah, but just to push on that, Arnulf, sorry to jump in, but this is OpenAI developing.
I think less. I think less and less. I think recording feature as the firm grows or as the firm matures, it's not just or as these aggregators roll up different
the classic
different RAs
thing recently from Sam Altman is you have to give
there is standardization.
Like, I don't want to decide between
that's part of what it means to join that organization. Is that you streamline your structure, and there may be a transition period, but within 6 months or 12 months, we expect everybody to be on the same system.
Are going to alter the behavior of the end user. And then the end user, if they can do any agentic workflow within the browser, why would they use apps, right? They could just ask it to go and do a string of operations that replicate any application. I think
that's where the importance of being vertical specific really comes to play, right? Like when we build tools like Arnulf and I, like GReminders and Finny alike, we build for a very, very specific persona in mind. We think about the flows that are intuitive to them, the data that they want to see, what matters, what doesn't. And OpenAI is incredibly powerful, but they're a horizontal tool, right? Like there's fundamental differences there. And I think in the way I see the world, like vertical applications that are powered and are benefiting from everything that OpenAI is doing and all the trillions of dollars that Sam Altman is raising, it's just the place to be.
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, Arnold.
So I have a couple viewpoints on it. I think it's great that they continue to sort of innovate, and I think the AI requires a different type of thinking, right? If you take an AI first approach, you will think about things differently than something that was created 10 or 20 years ago. So that's one. But in general, OpenAI, similar to, you can probably draw parallels to what AWS started early when cloud came to be. They had very basic infrastructure stuff like files, S3, virtual machines, and then over time they layered on all these different sort of what we call platform as a service type offerings. So I think and to a large extent, they made everybody more efficient, but also Amazon did a lot of essentially vendor lock-in to a large extent too, right? So once you're using those services, like you're not going anywhere. And so I think you probably see the same thing with a lot of the war model companies now turning into somewhat both infrastructure as well as sort of platform organizations. And really the last point is really around data access, right? So like when I think about AI, I don't just think about the models themselves, but I really think about the data that underlies all this sort of stuff. Like the models are almost optimizations to some degree. If you don't have access to the right data sets, right? Like, on the consumer world, consumers way ahead of enterprise because consumer stuff is mostly public. So like in the enterprise world, you're working with 20, 30 different systems. Like AI doesn't have access to that natively, right? So somebody's got to build all
it's like the iceberg graphic, right? Where the public information is such a small proportion of the actual.
So like Copilot is awesome, right? Because of that access to, maybe has access to Office documents, SharePoint, email, and Microsoft Teams. Okay, great. But that's generally where it stops. It doesn't have access to the CRM. It doesn't have access to the ERP. It doesn't have access to, financial planning tools. It doesn't have access to a whole plethora of things that you use every single day. And so like people have to spend the time to, plumb into these systems, be it APIs or what have you, to get access to the data at the right time. And again, understand that this household is related to this data set over here that's related to that household and so on and so forth. And so I think, I agree with Victoria on the, verticalization and, understanding what are the systems that people use, making sure that you actually have connectors within them, and then that those connectors can talk to each other in a way that understands, where the right data lives. So to be able to power the data side, and then sort of, the prompting and the workflows, and then it's like the model. So kind of almost in that order, is how I think about sort of AI, at least in the enterprise, relative to our industry.
But do you feel safe enough? Do you guys feel safe enough to expose an MCP and let people access your data within ChatGPT?
100%.
Yeah, you would do that. Do you have that live right now?
We don't. We are building an MCP for scheduler, for example, right now that we have some use cases for. So we will continue to do that, and we'll definitely. I absolutely, every platform, every program is probably building some type of assistant. And, over the next several years, you're going to have AI agents talking to each other. Getting that right today is still, is really getting the stars to align. But that will get better and smoother, I think, over the next several years.
Yeah. I think MCPs are a bit of a sleeper. Not a lot of people know what they are outside of maybe a tech world. Mm-hmm. They are incredibly powerful, and I don't think we've seen broad adoption among business or end users. And once people do adopt it, in my experience, it always blows them away what they can do. And I actually think we're going to see a dramatic change over the next year or two on this front.
We've built, we have an MCP internally to help us query our own database. So if, one day I wake up and I want to know which user in Finny has the most successful campaign going on, I can very easily query that. So it has been quite magical, and I could not agree more, Mark. I think it's something that people just don't talk about enough, but I'm sure it will catch up.
Yeah, at this conference I'm at with founders, a lot of people building tools, a lot of memory tools, right, where you can transport memory from one tool to another, from ChatGPT to Claude by MCP. There's a lot of interesting mainstream use cases. People also not worried about doing consumer apps, which I found awesome, right? There was so much fear around that over the last 10 years. So I find that really encouraging. So let me just end with sort of one final question, which we have to be able to mention a CRM on this program. It's sort of mandated in our contract. Will CRMs be around in 5 years? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think they will. CRMs traditionally have been this hub and spoke approach. So, I didn't buy Salesforce, for example, because I wanted Salesforce as a CRM. I'm buying the ecosystem too, right? And so the ecosystem is probably more important than the actual CRM itself, but the CRM matters because the ecosystem is hooked up to it. And so I think, AI in general, I think helps, like for us, for example, with things like transcripts and filling out fields that are empty, recommending updates to fields that should be done based on conversations and things like that. You're already seeing that stuff. So I think the CRM inherently have been a good system, but have been bad because it requires manual input. And I think AI and automations can effectively populate a lot of these systems. And so I do think CRMs will remain. I think they will evolve, and I think they also will have some native capabilities, but I think the ecosystem as a whole will also lift them up.
I have a slightly different take. I actually wish that James was still on, because I think he wrote a LinkedIn post that I could not agree more. I think CRM as a category is a tool of the past. It's extremely legacy. And now is the time to completely rethink that from the ground up. And as I try to rethink, how a modern version CRM would look and feel, what I think of is something more similar to a relationship operating system. And what I mean by that, it's almost like a second brain to the advisor that has all of their contacts, prospects, clients alike, can check in with them at the right time with the right message, and does a lot of the work that would normally fall on a business development analyst more than a traditional CRM. I think we'll see that full, agentic flow happening. So I think CRM as a term will cease to exist from our vocabularies.
Yeah, I know Zero Basis Point spent some time talking about the relationship operating system. Great podcast, would recommend it. And I think my personal take is there might be a thing we call CRM, but I think the user experience will change dramatically. And I think it'll be a lot more agentic. It'll actually do things, which I think is going to be probably the biggest difference. I mean, I think, it's really fascinating to think that these relational databases are 30 years old, right? When I was at Dreamforce, there were signs saying, make sure your CRM is not older than your intern. I thought that was a very clever dig by some people. So, yeah, I think we'll see a rapid evolution there. It's really pretty. It's going to be really interesting. Well, we're coming up on time, and I appreciate both of you coming on. And let me just first say thank you for spending the time. And as you mentioned, Victoria, James had to drop off because he wasn't feeling well. But I appreciate you guys hanging on with the lesser host and navigating through this tough time. I hope to see more of what you guys ship in the coming 6 months to a year.
Thank you, Mark. I hope
Thank you very much.
feel better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, before we close, what I like to do is I like to ask, where can people see you next? Where will you be speaking, and where can people find you online?
Finny will be actually at Advise AI next week. I don't know if the podcast will be out by that point. But it will be amazing.
I will be there.
We'll be in Vegas. And generally speaking, you can always go to our website, www.finny.com. Pretty active also on socials, YouTube channel now, going on with all of our latest features. So yeah, we're pretty much everywhere.
You can reach us on our website, GReminders.com. You can also reach me on email. It's arnulf@GReminders.com. And the next show will be at Schwab Impact.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thanks again. And I look forward to seeing what you guys do next.
Thank you, Mark.